With regard to the history of Father Gregory's monastery of the Transfiguration, I will try my best to recall what occurred. He was tonsured to be a monk by Archbishop Sylvester, my predecessor as bishop in Canada, and then he also ordained him to be a deacon and a priest at St. Peter and Paul Cathedral in Montreal. Father Gregory had been before that a draftsman in an architectural firm, and he was a long-time good friends with the priest of our church, Father Alexis Vinogradov, who's a well-known church architect. Father Gregory first was living in a small cabin that he built by himself out of logs in the forests in the Laurentian Mountains in Quebec. And this is back in the 1970s. Then, with the direction of Archbishop Sylvester, he moved to Rawdon, which is an hour's drive north of Montreal. Rawdon is a town in which there was an Orthodox chapel that was built by Father Oleg Boldarev, first on his own property, but then the chapel was moved to the Russian Cossack cemetery. It's called the Russian cemetery or the Cossack cemetery, but depending on who's talking about it, but it's probably primarily Cossack in motivation and foundation. And there's a large war monument about Cossacks at this cemetery. It's a very beautiful and picturesque cemetery. In the summertime, that is. In the wintertime, because it's in the Laurentian Mountains, it has very deep snow. So Father Gregory was living there. He moved his skeet cabin to Rawdon, and then he built an extension to it, which became the St. Seraphim skeet at Rawdon. He made this skeet a two-story dwelling out of 6x6 logs, squared off logs, that is. And he lived there for quite a long time. He was, in the course of this time, he had many young men who tried to come and follow him in monastic life. But Father Gregory was and still is following the example of the Egyptian desert in terms of way of life, and it is very, very strict and severe. And most young people, even then, had a difficulty persevering in it. Many came and many went. One came and stayed for a long time, but then eventually he left to become to study to become a priest in the States, and then later to serve in Western Canada as a priest monk. After that, there was a pause, and another young man came. This was who is now Father Samuel. He had come from Western Canada, and he had been looking for a place in which he could live a monastic life, and with God's help, he was able to persevere in following Father Gregory's way. And he prospered, and he studied, and as monks do, living and praying and fasting, lots and lots of fasting. They have a strictly vegetarian kind of life. And Mostly strictly vegetarian. Sometimes there's dairy products, and sometimes fish. But other than that, they lived together for quite a long time. But then Father Gregory's health began to become weaker because the winters are severe, and they had no running water. Water had to be carried by buckets from a well which was about 500 meters away from the monastery. So that meant winter and summer carrying buckets with a yoke over the shoulders and 2 strings on either side to help to support the buckets of water. And there was, of course, an exterior toilet in the old-fashioned manner. They lived like this, but it was severe, and Father Gregory's health began to be weaker. And so he thought that it was, with God's blessing, time to try to go to Europe where the climate is milder, and to try to continue there. And Father Samuel would look for another monastery there. But it was not God's will that this should be the case. In Europe, his health became even worse, and so he finally realized that he had to return. So he and Father Samuel returned to Canada. They lived in Rawdon for a little while, and they found a place finally in British Columbia, which they could manage to afford with the help of a family in Gibsons. And with their hands, they built another skeet building down the hill on the side of a small mountain, I guess you would call it. And this skeet again was on a concrete foundation, but it was also constructed from 6x6. I believe it was cedar. And they lived in this 2-story skeet with its chapel for many years, during which the now Father Moses came from Ontario to try to live with them, and he did live with them and persevered and continued until this day. Circumstances, they held also people from the lower mainland of British Columbia became aware of them, and they had the same problem that Father Gregory had when he was in the mountains near Montreal. I didn't mention that he had moved back into the hills southeast of Montreal from Rawdon because of too many people, and and even in his new place near Fitch Bay, there were too many people. It was hard on him, not just the way of life, but how many people were interrupting his life and asking for his help. And the same thing yet again happened when he was in Gibsons. Many, many, many people came, and it became very difficult to have silence and to maintain their monastic way of life, of communication with the Lord, which is the whole point of monastic life. Communion with the Lord, deepening communion with the Lord, growing in deeper experience of this love of the Lord, and interceding for all the people who are asking for spiritual and physical support of some sort, material support too. So Father Gregory was rescued from the situation in the lower mainland by an economic situation which required the sale of the land on which he was living, and because he was a part owner of this land, he received part of the proceeds of the sale, and with this, the three monks found a place that they could afford about 200 kilometers north of Kamloops, at what is called Lone Butte, where they once again built a small monastic. It's not so small, but it's on one level. As I have not had the blessing to be there, but I've seen the photographs of it. It's on one level instead of several levels, and they have continued to live there, prospering in the Lord, in communion with the Lord, praying constantly as they are supposed to, and they love to do. And they have been helping people as they have been always called to do, but at a more manageable rate. And they have been producing iconography. Father Gregory has always been an iconographer as long as I've known him. And his disciples have been doing similar iconography and also woodwork and producing other things for to help the economy of the skeet, including, of course, the production of a large number of candles for parish worship. And that's as well as I can easily recall the life of Father Gregory Papazian, his family name is, and his brotherhood.